10x bet on my happiness that if this works out, then like this is huge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Fetters Fireside. Together with me today, I have Zach Lauzon. And basically, I'm going to first start by asking you, Zach, how you're doing, how you're feeling today.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty great, pretty great. We had a bit of technical difficulties, but we're getting there. Okay, I'm gonna start with the usual introduction of what we're doing here, which is like discussing fetters. And I'm gonna start this conversation with what exactly are the fetters. And you can think of the fetters as phenomenological illusions or perceptual lenses that we add on top of our sense experience that give rise to basically suffering and to the sense of separation from others and the world. Now, that I've made this introduction, I would like to first ask you, what's your prior experience to meditation before getting into fetters and working together?
Yeah, so I first became interested in meditation in 2023. And I started trying a bunch of different random practices. I think a few months in, my fiance Tina tipped me off to this thing called jhanas, which were just beginning to take off at the time. And found the company Journey, started becoming interested in what they were doing. So I went on a few retreats with them over the years, 3 retreats in total. And
Yeah.
as far as like meditation experience goes, it's probably 150 hours total by this point. Not a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, awesome. And now that we've set the frame for what was your prior experience coming onto this process, we're going to start with the first 3 fetters. And for those of you that don't know, it's what I usually call the sense of the little guy in the head or the little person in the head. And I'm going to show you a picture of this one just because I found it funny. And this sense is the thing that we usually call the sense of the self, right? I would actually want to know, what is your experience pre-stream entry or pre-fetters 1 to 3 working on them, and after, and how did it feel going from little person in the head to just body mind, basically?
Yeah. So in my meditation experience, I feel like the sense of the little guy in the head did start weakening already. Like before we like directly look at the first 3 fetters. Like I remember distinctly on retreat starting to have the sense that, oh, I'm not like what I am is not like the thing that's doing everything in the world. It's actually the space in which I experience everything. It's like sight, sound, smell, thoughts. Like I started to feel more identified with the awareness in which all this happens rather than, some epistemic agent that performs all of these functions. When we started working together and dropped the first 3 fetters, that I think that sense just became more solidified and clearly obvious. Like, oh yeah, I am like not my thoughts. I am not like the thinker of the thoughts. The thoughts are just happening. And I don't really have control over that. There's some directionality that occurs, but it's not like some deterministic lever that I can pull to like make these things happen. There's also like some subtle visual shift in where I felt like more like, you talk about like having like goggles or being like somehow like separate from like what you're looking, like you're on the inside out.
Yeah.
Then that became a bit more stable too.
Yeah. I usually make the difference between feeling like you're in third person somehow in your own body, but still experiencing things third person. And after stream entry, it's almost like you have your head in the water, or you're having your head directly in the game, in the stream of life, basically. Before and after, you have that sense of like contracted awareness of this sense of almost like you're watching the screen of experience in a very limited manner on both dimensions. And then for some at stream entry, it goes panoramic boundless, right? That's what we call panoramic boundless. And for some people, sometimes it's full panoramic. The axis, both left, right, and up, down, are just as open. Of course, the question is, because everyone has the impression that it has big implications for their life, seeing through the sense of the self, whatever that means. What were the implications for you when they saw that there was just the body, mind, and not exactly any any meaning to the sense of me, mine, or whatever? What that felt like?
Yeah, there's definitely like it sort of became like this like very like mundane realization where it sounded initially when exploring this that there was some like big thing that was like a big deal and had like huge ramifications. But upon working with it and realizing that all it was saying is that there's no somehow separate entity that's like separated from the rest of experience that's like doing all the things that I consider me. That was word salad. But like it was just this stuff is always so tricky to explain. But it was just a seeing that, oh, like there's no like separate entity that's like doing the thinking or like intending actions or anything like that. It's just, oh, this is all happening within the same stream of experience. So in that sense, it was like, oh, well, that's like almost obvious in a sense. There isn't some like hidden part of me that's like somehow actually the real me. It's just all already experiencing and happening. And as far as like the implications of that happening, oh, life just went on as normal. I like I would sometimes notice that I'm like doing a chore or something and realizing that, oh, like I'm not actually like controlling all the actions that I'm performing to do this thing. They're just happening. Like my body knows how to move itself. And it can seem that I'm like controlling everything, but if I actually look at what's happening, it's a far more automatic process. And I think there's like a certain ease to that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely very common for people to take this so-called insight as a grand reveal, awakening, as if it meant something. As you can remember last night's conversation with the disappointment of the insight, actually, which is like you feel like I'm going to get an insight and everything's going to be great. And then actually this is more like the start of the journey, because the thing which we're going into, which is attachment and aversion, apparently doesn't need a little person in the head to just happen, or rather, due to conditioning, the sense of pushing and pulling at experience and trying to change how things feel, it's just going on. And of course, attachment and aversion are basically the fourth and fifth of the fetters. They are usually seen as the same movement, as clinging, craving, how you wanna call it, and the implications of this one. And I'm probably going to show the graph with the suffering reduction once they drop. They're making life way easier, right? But before I'm asking this, I want to ask you how you experience the before and after weakening and before and after dropping reactivity or attachment aversion. How is that?
Yeah. So my experience before weakening, there was definitely a lot of suffering. Whenever like things would happen that I'd be disappointed or frustrated by, and it'd be very easy for me to be caught ruminating, like having like looping thoughts, like keeping up like dissatisfaction, continually like putting energy into it. And I find that like bad moods were often very sticky and like had momentum to them, where something bad happens and then I'm like in a bad mood and I stop, like it's very easy for that to like start affecting like the rest of my experience, and like I'd be like less motivated to work and like take care of the things that I need to do. A lot of like emotions would kind of like spiral and linger. After weakening, there was definitely a sense of these like have like way less staying power now. I found myself like much more able to just actually sit with something that was bothering me and like let it dissolve. As a result, I started having a lot more good days, where even if something like goes wrong, like it doesn't like have this like momentum, this staying power that like ends up turns like a bad hour into like a bad day or a bad weekend. After breaking, it was like that like dialed up. Like there were even, how do I describe the difference?
Hard.
Like I just
It's
started
very hard.
noticing. What's that?
It's very hard usually. It's hard
Yeah.
to describe it.
Like I just started noticing like I haven't been bothered by something in a while now. This is weird.
Suffering from success, that's what I call it. You usually suffer before and then you suffer from success, basically.
Right. Like, and
Yeah.
that's not to say that bad things didn't happen, that I would, you know, things will still happen that feel bad, but they don't become this like thing that I hold on to. Like I was just automatically willing to experience whatever is happening and accept whatever emotions are there, without like habitually pushing them away, resisting them, attaching identity to them or my ego to them, and then like start like stirring up conflicts with other people about them if I like don't like the implications of how I feel. Like
Hmm.
everything, things are just smoother, generally speaking.
Awesome. And because you've started mentioning sort of like the process and the categories of things you've worked on, what did you encounter as difficulties in the process and what kind of things you worked on? I feel like everyone uses different fuel for this practice. We've talked before that I've used a lot of relationship stuff and some work, but mostly relationships. So I'm curious, what were the things you doubled down on, or where do you feel like you got stuck?
Yeah. As far as difficulties go, the practice itself in which you're like digging up all these things bother you is naturally unpleasant. So like, it can be hard to drum up motivation to go into like issues you have. It's it's a naturally a thing that you want to avoid, especially if there is like a lot of things going on in my life, as I had a lot of stress or conflict already. Adding onto that pile, there is definitely an aversion to doing that. It's like, oh, I'm already going through so much. Like, I don't want to like add more onto my plate. So drumming up like the motivation and like the rationale that this is like long term beneficial definitely presented a challenge point. Um, there are also some moments of like confusion about the practice where wasn't clear if I should be like trying to be looking for an insight about what I was looking at, or if I was just aiming to sort of like dissolve that issue itself and then move on to other issues. That's something that we chatted a lot about. So I think those are like the broad like difficulty areas. As far as the fuel and like content that I worked with, there was a lot of working with regrets about the past, about my
Yeah.
actions, about how I treated people, things that I wish I did differently. This is both like relationships, also like how I like treated my life. It's like, all kinds of things that if I had been more emotionally capable in the past, I probably would have tried harder at work or like made different financial decisions or, things like that. There were a
Mhm.
lot of like, there was also like, situations I can't change. Like I lost a friend a long time ago and, working with feelings about that. Yeah, just a lot of like wishing that things were different than the way they are now was a lot
Yeah.
of it for me.
Yeah. One thing I'm actually curious, sorry to interrupt you. I'm actually curious about the first thing you mentioned. And I find that it's one of the most important things, which is keeping it going until it drops. I sometimes have people that so like for some reason they choose to end the process early. And it's unfortunately hard for me to describe how good it is after dropping reactivity. This is why we're having this conversation to some extent. What kept you going, or what convinced you that the processes were going? Because we both discussed that it's not necessarily easy, especially when you got a lot of stuff going on. Like, especially when people are starting this process, the first month and a half, there are a lot of things. You know that we have the two categories, things keeping you up at night, and then you get to work on your big desires and goals. But when you're here on the things keeping you up at night and the things that are kind of like messing up with your day, that's not necessarily an easy one, right? Like, especially like, oh, I already have these problems and I'm going to add, bringing up other problems from the past, or I'm going to fully go into this unpleasant sensation. How do you see that? Like, what was like, well, let me trust the process, because not everyone necessarily trusts the process. So what did it for you basically?
For sure, yeah. I think there's two big aspects here. The first was a very strongly held motivation that if this whole thing is like legit, then it's basically what I've always been looking for, which was I got into meditation and therapy and all these things because I wanted to be able to uh, hold emotions in myself and others without resisting them, without stirring up conflict. I wanted to be able to show up better for people in my relationships and in my life generally, not being held back by emotions, but rather having emotional fluidity. And the thesis here was that if I could not have default resistance to emotions, then that would change everything. So this was like the I don't know 10x bet on my happiness that if this works out, then like this is huge.
Yeah,
So that in itself was
agreed.
motivating enough to be like, well, yeah, I should put in the time here. And the the second aspect was as momentum picked up with the practice, I started seeing that, oh, you know what? Like these things that I've worked through, like, are bothering me less. And I am like, I could start seeing like incremental progress with my like reactivity, attachment, aversion, even without like as far as weakening and breaking. I did feel that I was making incremental progress, and that in itself was quite motivating.
So like a segue, especially around the progress aspect. Um, w- Around us, a lot of the people that do meditation and a lot of the people we know that are into this thing, they do have at times a certain type of resistance or doubt around whether this will mess up their life. And the way you could meditation or the meditative practice they feel could mess up their life is if I were to be happy, why would I do things? Which is the whole thing like meditation killed my ambition. What now? In your case, do you notice a negative impact on your ambitions or whether ambition even makes sense as a frame of reference? And sometimes I did mention last night in the conversation that some people do notice that they get this sort of like bypassing way of meditation being the thing that they do because the rest of the things are not taken care of. Almost like they lose interest in life. What was the case for you? Like, did it make it worse to do things in the world?
Absolutely not. In fact, I feel like that it's unlocked my ambition. How do I want to say this? Like, what I've noticed is not that there is some like loss of ambition that I'm like, because I do resonate with the fear of like, oh, if I'm like not bothered by things anymore, then like, will I just like not care about doing anything? But I've honestly found the opposite to be true, where I am now significantly less held back by anxiety, fear, depression, sadness, where there are many things in my life that I wanted to do, but consistently found myself like procrastinating them or blocked from doing them by emotions. And now I'm finding that I have actually so much more zest for life because even in the absence of attachment and aversion, there is still desire. I still want things, and I
Yeah.
still find myself moving toward them now with fewer impediments. So that's been great.
Yeah, I actually do like the reason. I actually like the way you used desire because it's probably gonna pop some ears in the ears like, but the Buddha said that desire is all of the root of all suffering. So it's like I feel like that was a bit of a mistranslation. It was more about craving and clinging.
Right.
You still have preferences. You're still a full, not a fuel, a full human, a full human being. The reason why I keep saying fuel is actually that's my next question, which is okay. You've dropped aversion, you've dropped attachment. What is your fuel? Like, how do you
Yeah.
look at this frame of reference?
Yeah. Going back to the last thing, like desire, like,
Yeah,
I still have preferences. I still have things that I want in the world, like love, connection, like I still like want to build things and create things and like help people. Like all of these things are like still alive in me. Um, so it makes me think about how the concepts that we need like to be dissatisfied with something in order to do something about it is like that's clearly not the whole picture. Like there is still motivation and desire without like dissatisfaction.
yeah, amazing. Time-wise, I feel like every time I find myself asking the guest this question is, if you were to estimate between us working together and you on your own, before, or not before, between starting with stream entry first 1 to 3 and dropping 4 and 5, what would your interval for practice be? Besides
Yeah,
those 150 hours beforehand.
yeah, I'd estimate 50 hours.
Yeah, which is a bit lower than what's being sold as what you need to the whole thousands of hours necessary for meditation before it bears fruition.
Yeah.
But I feel like so like having this type of outlier results, but not necessarily outlier in the small circles we are in teapot. I think like that ends up being pretty useful. What is the impact of the processes for you in terms of the most important things for you, which is like work, loved ones? How do they receive it? Because I know you had one particular tweet recently, and that amused me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
let's see. I mean, the biggest one for me was with loved ones and relationships.
Yeah.
I'll start with that. And that has been dramatically better. I had like a long running pattern uh, with my partner where we would, something would come up, we would have a fight. And usually this would just be my partner expressing something that she's upset about, which is a totally normal thing to do. But it was very easy for that to like end up bothering me, and I would like resist how that makes me feel, and then I would push back against that, and this would start conflict. I would end up like rejecting her, and we'd have all these like conflict cycles and all that. And since then, like breaking reactivity has just totally like dropped. How do I describe it? Like it's all of like the fuel of that pattern has just like evaporated. Like now the normal response to like when something like upsetting happens is to just accept that and acknowledge it and like be there with it and like not resist it. And that is an incredible thing. Because that's what I've like wanted to be able to do for so long, like with meditation and therapy. And I've definitely made a lot of progress like since the beginning, but I feel like this like put it over the finish line. So I'm incredibly excited about that.
Awesome.
Um, and yeah, our relationship has been really great since then. So I'm really excited.
Perfect. Perfect. One of the things, because sorry if I interrupted you, if you want to
Go
say
ahead.
something more. So like because the following graph, which I'm gonna display on my face, is the one we did a bunch of weeks ago, the one with the plateaus.
Mhm.
There are more like ranges. In that you can see that there are four of them, right? And the first one is stream entry. I usually call that like a 5 to 10% suffer reduction. There's weakening or reactivity or weakening attachment and aversion, which is like 20, 25% or so, maybe a bit more. And then dropping or breaking craving or reactivity, right? Which is the third of the plateaus. How good do you rate, as in like, how do you describe how good it feels? You know that I had that, for me, stream entry was like getting a free lunch or getting a croissant daily and so on. How do you feel? How would you describe each shift for your well-being on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Let's see. I would describe stream entry as that's like a slight little bump in happiness. Like, oh, this is nice. Like things are a little lighter. Like I'm a little less like there's just like a little less effort in daily life. Nothing like amazing or shocking, but just like a nice little bit. Weakening reactivity was a pretty significant boost where it felt like a significant fraction of my days were like negative or crappy switched to like the majority of them being positive. When it came to breaking, it felt like, oh, like most of my days are good now. And even when something bad happens, it doesn't stay. So that's like I don't know how to quantify it, but it's honestly great.
I put a price number on it, and I've showed it to the graph to a bunch of people, and it does get certain reactions from people when I put the price tag, just because I kind of desired to make a point, as in you think that you want the things, but you can get the things and not have the goodness. It's sort of like, you know, that two by two, have thing, not have thing, be happy, not be happy. You would be satisfied if you don't get most things but are still happy. You would not be satisfied with getting most things and not being happy at the end. And of course, working through this reactivity, we do end up, I don't know, like, let's call it tens of issues in the whatever number of sessions and months we do in this practice. So of course, my question is, you've dealt, I don't know, like 40, 50, whatever, 60 issues processed in those, whatever they are. Do you feel like the path is still done? How do you see the difference between reactivity work and, you know, cleaning up and showing up differently to life?
Yeah. The way I see it is now like the rest of the game is unlocked where I still have like fundamentally like within me all the patterns I have those aren't changed by dropping reactivity, but there is so much more space available to look at how I show up and show up differently because there's no longer this like automatic aversion to acknowledging, oh, the way that I show up in this situation is not good. It causes harm to people. I don't like that. There's no longer a habitual like, oh, I don't want to acknowledge that. there's a, oh, well, okay, yeah, I should do something different here. And it just becomes a lot easier to look at these things and adjust. So yeah, like it's definitely not like a you do this and you're done, but it's you do this and it's a lot easier to keep going and show up the way you want to.
Yeah.
And I do want to. This is jumping back a bit, but you asked about like what the benefits for like work and relationships are, and I did want to point out like the differences for work as well, which is that there's so much less procrastination now when it comes to my job. As an engineer, I find myself oftentimes in situations where I'm blocked on some problem that I don't know how to solve, and that would just be just an emotional pit for me, where there would be a lot of resistance and frustration about being in such situations, and banging my head against the wall. I'm not sure what to do, and I could be stuck in there for days. This would also like show up in like trying to like write a document. It would always like bring up a lot of resistance for me. I find now that it's so much easier to face such situations without resisting them, and spend much less time blocked. And as a result, I've been much more productive and much less stressed at work, which has been really great.
Awesome. For context, you came to work together after you saw the interview with Yanda, which is somewhat funny. And even though we sort of like there has been content made available about all these things, what are some of the things that you feel like were not presented to you, whether it's the meditation space fully, not just, even whether it's about Fetters, whether it's about meditation, what are some things that would have, were they to show up in your life earlier, you would have given this a fair shot that sort of like this is a worth pursuit?
Yeah, such a broad question. Like it's
Anything you have in
yeah.
mind?
I think the tough thing with meditation is it's extremely broad. Like
Yeah.
there are literally like hundreds of different like practices, lineages that all have like different effects, different time and techniques that it takes to like achieve results. And I definitely received like early impressions that it takes like a lot of time to like get anywhere. And I also like saw like lots of like warnings and things about like the dark night of the soul. Like if you go heavy on insight practice, then you like might like really mess yourself up and like have a really bad time, and it might be hard to like show up in the rest of your life as you go through this process. And I think the really exciting thing about both jhana practice and this Fetter's inquiry is that it doesn't like, I think the risk profile and the as well as like the time that it takes to like make progress look a lot better, generally speaking. Um, so I guess like I don't know, knowing about these things earlier would have been something really great for me, because it took a while to like find like these practices. What else would I want to know? That
Yeah.
I would love future me to tell earlier me that yeah, this is the thing that you want. You want to drop your default resistance to emotions, and this is how you can do that. That would
Yeah,
have been a
no,
cool message.
amazing, amazing. Yeah, no, I'm gonna be honest. I had the same experience where I was looking. I was like, man, some of these choices that I've made from attachment, it's like,
Oh
wow,
god.
really bad. Yeah, it's like worth crying over. Perfect.
Yep.
And we're reaching the end of our conversation. It was a much shorter one. I think we were much more swift with the responses. Are there any other things, especially because we are in our small corner of meditative space, to those that maybe have done maybe jhanas and somehow feel like they might be a risk, or rather, like somehow it's incompatible, or they're sort of like starting in the way. And I don't mean like, just to make sure this is not me trying to pitch them. I mean more so like if someone has done jhana, I've seen that I've made a post recently about jhanas and fetters being very synergistic. So for someone that has done jhana, what would you explain the benefits or the easiness you got from jhanas that translated to fetters, and how you see that transition?
Yeah. For someone that's already practiced jhanas, I think the best thing about reactivity practice is that there's a few things to say here.
Yeah.
One is that reactivity practice is great because I find that it makes jhana practice easier because there is so much less automatic resistance to sensations. So in jhana practice, you're like, continually recursively relaxing, noticing any tensions in your experience. I find that fewer tensions automatically crop up in response to whatever's happening. So in that sense, it makes jhana practice better. Also, from the position of like having done jhana practice, is a great position to do reactivity work. I got a lot of mileage out of like starting with jhana practice and then transitioning into the reactivity work because it makes the process very clear. Like when you're in a very like when you're in a very collected state, it's very easy to see the tension turn into the reaction and notice like the separation between those and stay in that state. And also, just like jhanas as a somatic resource, like spending time in jhana like helps dissolve like any tension and dis-ease that comes from like doing reactivity work where you're bringing up all these things that bother you. It's nice to have a way to sort of come back to a baseline, and I find that it helps you go faster.
Now, thank you so much, Zach, for sharing everything you've learned and everything you experienced.
Yeah, of
I'm not
course.
sure if you have, but if you do have an end message, please share it. If you have everything that pops your mind, this is the time. We are, like I said, we're still pretty early. We're being very quick. So if there's anything you wish to share with those that have started the path or with those that are willing to start their meditative path, any message, any don't do it, run away, turn back, anything like that, that was the time.
Yeah, I guess I'd just say if you've started, I would highly recommend sticking with it. And if you're at all interested, give it a try.
Once again, thank you so much for for being willing to put yourself in the limelight. We are gonna reconvene for the fourth episode really soon. Once again, thank you, Zach, and goodbye, everyone. Take care.